The grill sizzled with defiance. Thick smoke curled upward into the hot summer air, twisting like a warning flare, while the sweet, peppered aroma of slow-cooked ribs danced with the laughter of families spread across the community park. Kids screamed over popsicles, grandmas snapped green beans in Tupperware, and lawn chairs formed a crescent around folding tables bursting with homemade dishes. It was the kind of Saturday that was supposed to heal the week that I was off duty, but that never meant off alert. Not in this town that I'd spent the better part of my afternoon manning the grill because I actually enjoyed it. Something about fire, timing, and patience suited me. Controlled chaos, you know? Maybe that's why the Bureau likes me. I'd earned a little peace. I was wearing gym shorts, old sneakers, and a shirt that read Team Ribs. Most people wouldn't guess I'd spent the morning helping close out a multi-state trafficking case or that I could disarm a man before he finished blinking. To the world, I was just Jay. Quiet, steady, black guy who brought the best barbecue to every community cookout. No one ever guessed what the J in FBI stood for. Then he showed up. I heard him before I saw him, the kind of loud, clueless voice that made you involuntarily clench your jaw. Bro, this looks legit, the voice drawled, somewhere between a frat party announcer and a beer commercial audition. We got our own pitmaster out here. I turned my head just slightly, enough to clock the Oakleys, the sunburned biceps, the cargo shorts. Early 20s. Blonde, tan, built like he thought bench pressing gave him wisdom. And then came the smug sidekick pack, all dressed in ironic tanks and backward caps, like extras from a cancelled MTV show. Chad Whitmore. He strolled up like he owned the grass, the grill, and the oxygen we were breathing. Karen's boy. I'd met his mother once at a city council thing. She'd offered me a lemon bar and then asked if I was, with sanitation or security. Real Southern hospitality with a side of thinly sliced contempt. I smiled back then the same way I did now, tight-lipped and dangerous if you knew what to look for. Chad swaggered right up, didn't say hello, didn't ask if I was part of the neighborhood crew. He just slapped the table next to the grill with both hands and grinned like we were old friends. "Ayo, big man," he said, pointing a finger at me like a remote. "You mind firing up some of those ribs for me and my boys? We're trying to get lit back there." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" He didn't even blink. "Yeah, just throw on, like, 10. You got sauce, right?" I looked down at the grill. I had 2 racks prepped, resting like royalty. The flames were just right, the smoke fragrant and lazy. These ribs were spoken for. I met his eyes, and there wasn't even a flicker of awareness. Entitlement sat on him like a second skin. "You got a plate?" I asked, keeping it neutral. "Nah, man, just bring them over when they're ready. We're set up under the oaks." He waved vaguely toward the back corner of the park, where a Bluetooth speaker was already blasting music too loud for 3 p.m. and 3 coolers sat surrounded by half-empty cans. Then, like a bad sitcom cue, she arrived. Karen herself, striding like she'd won prom queen in '85 and never gave back the crown. Wide-brimmed hat, flowy blouse, too much perfume cutting through the brisket smoke. Her lips curled into what she probably thought was a charming smile. "Oh, I see you've met my son," she said brightly, squeezing his bicep like he was still 12. "Isn't he just the life of the party?" "He's something," I replied. "We're doing a little hangout for his boys before they head back to college," she explained, turning her eyes to the grill like it was an employee. "You don't mind helping out, do you? It would mean so much. They've been so stressed lately." I looked from her back to Chad, who was now picking at one of the tongs I'd carefully sanitized. He clicked them together like he'd discovered fire. "You hosting?" I asked. Karen tilted her head. "Oh, heavens no. The city organized all this, right? It's public space, after all. We're just making the most of it." In translation, they didn't bring a dish, a grill, or an invite. Chad snapped the tongs one last time. "So we good?" I got a date with a 6-pack and some ribs. Now, I'd dealt with worse. Overseas. In courtrooms. Inside the bureau. But there's something particularly galling about a grown man assuming you're the help because of your skin, your apron, and your silence. I wasn't angry yet. I was disappointed. And that's always worse. That I smiled, slow, casual. Sure. Let me just get these babies finished up first. Chad fist-pumped like a toddler winning at Jenga. Knew you had us. Appreciate it, my man. He and Karen turned back toward their camp, already chattering like it was a done deal. That I returned to the grill. Picked up the ribs. Turned them slowly, letting the smoke rise like a curtain. Every muscle in my jaw relaxed, like a deep breath before impact. That I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to educate. I wasn't going to post about it online or hope karma caught up. That I was going to handle it. You see, people like Chad never notice the details. They don't hear the way you say certain words. They don't see the deliberate movements. They assume the world is built to serve them because, in many ways, it's been allowed to. But here's the thing. That I'm not the grill guy. I'm an agent with a badge locked in my car's glove compartment, a gun under my picnic blanket, and clearance to run facial recognition software with a single photo. That I know how to dismantle lies, detect intent from my shifts, and track inconsistencies like blood trails. And right now, I'm watching a group of grown men get sloshed on a public lawn while a mother enables her son's entitlement like it's an Olympic sport. That I slid the ribs onto a clean tray and covered them with foil. They weren't for Chad. As I reset the grill, a familiar voice murmured near my shoulder. Mrs. Delgado, widow, block president, queen of the potato salad, you okay? She asked softly. She'd seen them too. I nodded. They just asked for ribs. She pursed her lips. They always ask. Never bring. I chuckled. You know how it is. She placed a gentle hand on my elbow. You let me know if you need anything. Anything. I smiled genuinely this time. Thank you. I'm good for now. She walked off, but the quiet solidarity settled on my chest like armor. I picked up the knife, sharpened it slowly against the steel, and stared down at the meat like a general reviewing troops. The next hour or two would play out exactly as it needed to. No confrontation. No headlines. Just a slow-roasting reality check with a side of justice. They wanted ribs, they'd get something unforgettable instead. The smoke thickened. Somewhere in the distance, Chad laughed, loud and grating, completely unaware that the man he just ordered around once negotiated a hostage release while handcuffed. This cookout was about to get interesting, and I had all the time in the world. By the time the sun dipped low enough to throw golden streaks across the picnic tables, the park had slipped into that warm, lazy rhythm where conversations grew louder, paper plates were stacked in laps, and toddlers with juice mustaches teetered between naps and sugar crashes. The ribs were done, resting in a closed container on the table beside my grill, untouched and deliberately out of reach. That's when Chad returned. He didn't ask if the food was ready. He sauntered up with a red Solo cup in one hand and a smug grin that had only gotten wider, like he'd spent the last hour being told he was hilarious and invincible. The kind of confidence that only comes from never being told no long enough to forget it's a real word. Yo, my man. Ribs ready, he said, slapping the side of the grill like it was his uncle's pickup. I turned slowly, wiping my hands on a towel. They're resting. Resting? He squinted like the word confused him. Meat needs time. You want it tough, I can plate it now. Nah, it's cool, he said, chuckling and looking over his shoulder toward his friends. Just don't want the crew getting cranky, you know? We got big stomachs and short tempers. I nodded once. Noted the way he phrased that. Noted the half-empty cup in his hand and the way he swayed just a little too easily for someone standing on flat grass. Karen materialized moments later, eyes scanning the grill like a queen inspecting peasantry. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Jay, honey, is there any way to hurry it up? The boys are getting hungry, and you're just so good at this. I held her gaze. Food's ready when it's ready. She blinked. Not used to pushback, clearly. I watched her recalibrate, trying to decide if I was being rude or just urban. Eventually, she landed on patronizing. "Well, you're the expert," she said, voice light, but her grip on Chad's arm told a different story. "Just don't forget who you're serving." Chad snorted. "Bet he's used to it." That one landed with a weight that hung in the air for a second too long. It wasn't loud. It wasn't said with anger. But it was sharp and clear and meant to see you my jaw tensed. I didn't rise to it. "I didn't need to, tell you what," I said, voice even. "Why don't you go set up some plates? I'll bring them over when it's time." Karen nodded, satisfied, and turned to leave. Chad lingered. "You ever do catering?" he asked suddenly. "Like, on the side?" "Sometimes," I replied. He grinned. "Man, I bet you'd make a killing if you just, leaned into the whole backyard vibe. Throw in some rap, some grill tips, you could go viral or something." I stared at him. He didn't notice. He was already walking away, waving his cup in lazy circles like he'd just blessed me with $1 million idea. I watched his back as he returned to the picnic corner where his friends lounged like they were at a country club instead of a public park. They were shouting over each other, tossing a football across toddlers, and cranking the volume on a Bluetooth speaker playing something with too much bass and too few lyrics. They were exactly what they appeared to be: cocky, careless, and far too comfortable. I kept my eyes on them while I quietly started breaking down the grill station. Not shutting it down, just preparing. The kind of preparation you do when you know a storm's coming, even if it's wearing pastel polos and boat shoes. A few minutes later, I walked over with the container of ribs, sealed, untouched, steaming beneath the foil. Chad's face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "There we go. The hero arrives." He reached for the lid. I didn't move. "I'm going to need y'all to set up a table. Napkins. Plates. You know. Basic hospitality." He frowned. "We're good, bro. Just hand them here." I didn't blink. "Set up a table." He rolled his eyes, but a few of his friends shuffled up, dragging over one of the park's folding tables with all the enthusiasm of a detention cleanup crew. Once it was in place, I slowly set the container down. Peeled back the foil like I was revealing gold. The aroma hit instantly: smoke, heat, sauce, fat. One of the guys actually groaned. "Damn," someone muttered. "That's beautiful." Chad leaned in, already licking his fingers like a cartoon wolf, and then, I closed the lid. "I need to see IDs." That stopped them. All movement froze. Even the speaker behind them suddenly felt too loud. "What?" Chad laughed. "Dude, what are you talking about? You've got alcohol in public," I said calmly. "And I just watched two of your guys hand a beer to someone who looks 17. So unless you want this cookout to end with a different kind of heat, I need IDs." Karen appeared like a scent, floral, tense, and panicked. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," I said. "We're about to have one." One of the boys tried to hide his beer behind his back. Another knocked over a cooler in the process. Chad stepped forward, trying to puff himself up. "Hey, relax, man. We're just having fun. You're not a cop." I reached into my back pocket. "Not for my badge, yet. Just my phone." "You're right. I'm not a cop." Karen stepped between us. "He's just a little wound up. Honestly, it's not a big deal. They're not driving. We're all here to relax." I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't used to being challenged. Used to her son being protected, excused, explained away. "You expect me to cook for a group of drunk undergrads while they flirt with underage girls and treat this like a frat house?" I asked. "Is that what relaxing means to you?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Chad laughed again, louder this time. "You know what, forget it. Just give us the ribs. We'll take care of the rest." I didn't move. He took a step closer, hand reaching, and that's when I said, flat and clear, touch the food again, and this becomes a legal situation. The way his face changed, like someone had pulled a curtain back and shown him the sun. Confusion, disbelief, indignation. But underneath it all, a flicker of uncertainty. Who the hell do you think you are? He asked. I said, stepping closer so only he could hear. You're about one bad decision away from your father losing his job. He flinched. Not visibly. Not to the crowd. But I saw it. That moment where the puzzle pieces didn't just fall, they shattered. Karen grabbed his arm. Come on, Chad. Let's go. He didn't resist. Just stood there, breathing heavy through his nose, staring at me like I'd rewritten a rulebook no one told him existed. I nodded once. Calm. Unshaken, Karen tugged again, harder this time. They backed away. I watched them return to their corner, muted now, huddled, uncertain. The laughter quieter, the music a little more awkward, and I returned to the grill, ribs still hot, respect still intact. There would be no yelling. No chaos. No viral clips, just a slow simmer, and that was enough, for now. I stayed by the grill longer than I needed to, hands moving automatically, wiping down tongs, adjusting the coals, sealing up trays I'd already decided weren't going anywhere near Chad or his buddies. The sun had started its slow descent behind the tree line, and the heat softened into something gentler. Around me, the park settled into its late afternoon rhythm, families packing up half-empty coolers, kids running slower laps, more tired now than excited. But behind me, in that corner under the oaks, the frat boy energy still pulsed like a headache that wouldn't go away. I didn't need backup. What I needed was clarity. The problem wasn't just Chad and his ego, or his mother and her carefully disguised superiority complex. The problem was what Chad had said offhandedly during the last exchange, when he thought no one important was listening, something about his dad covering up that DUI last year and how he'd never spent a night in a cell, thanks to connections. Those words didn't just bounce off me. They sank deep, like coals under the grill, quiet, hot, and ready to ignite something bigger. I knew his dad. Sheriff Whitmore. Elected 3 terms in a row, ran a campaign on values, posed with golden retrievers and flagpoles, and once said in a recorded council meeting that everyone should just comply, and we wouldn't have these incidents. The kind of man who smiled with all teeth and made you feel like you were a guest in your own country. That DUI might have been just one of many. Maybe it got buried. Maybe it never made it into the official database. But I had more tools than most. I stepped away from the grill, heading toward my car at the edge of the lot. I unlocked the glove compartment and slid out a slim, plain folder I kept for situations exactly like this, because sometimes justice needed a nudge, not a headline. Inside was my agency-issued tablet. Secure. Encrypted. Limited only by the rules I chose to follow. Back in the driver's seat, I booted it up, fingers moving with practiced rhythm. First, background check on Chad Whitmore. Local database gave me the public stuff, graduated from a mid-tier college with a business degree, no employment history to speak of. No arrests. No citations. Clean as a whistle dipped in bleach, too clean. Next, I accessed a different portal, quiet, internal only. I didn't need to launch an investigation. I just needed to find a thread worth pulling, and there it was. A juvenile incident sealed by request of the sheriff's office. No details on the incident itself, just a timestamp from 2 years ago and a matching case ID linked to vehicular misconduct with alcohol suspected. The notation didn't say, cleared. It said, diverted. Meaning it never saw court. Never saw daylight. I sat back, exhaled slowly. So Chad really did skate. And if he was drunk that day, and the girl sitting in the passenger seat of his car was underage, like he'd bragged about earlier, then this went deeper than barbecue and rude comments. This was the kind of thing that left real scars, and Karen knew. Of course she did. Her whole attitude today was one of a woman who believed the world owed her apologies just for asking her family to follow basic rules that I made one call. Not the kind you see in movies, with tense voices and dramatic promises. Just a simple, professional exchange with a former colleague at the county registrar's office. I asked for clarification on sealed records policy. He confirmed that while the public couldn't request details, someone with federal credentials could flag it for internal review if there was cause. And cause, as it turned out, included patterns of misconduct in public spaces, especially when minors or alcohol were involved. That I left the grill under the supervision of Mrs. Delgado, who, without asking, had already taken over plating tamales and organizing leftover bags of chips. I didn't need to explain. She just nodded like she'd seen this story before. As I crossed back toward Chad's corner, the volume had gone down, but the energy had shifted. Two girls who looked barely old enough to vote were giggling as they sipped spiked lemonade, feet up on coolers they didn't bring. One of Chad's friends was struggling to open a third beer with his teeth, which was going exactly how you'd expect. Karen sat off to the side in a collapsible lawn chair, sunglasses on, pretending to read a magazine she hadn't turned the page of in 20 minutes. That I approached the edge of the group and waited. Chad saw me first. "You bring more ribs," he called, eyes slightly glassy. "No," I said evenly. "I came to talk." Karen perked up, removing her sunglasses. "Is there a problem?" "Not yet," I replied. "But I need to ask a few questions. About that DUI your son mentioned earlier." The music didn't stop, but the energy did. Chad blinked. "What? You said earlier that your dad helped you out of a DUI. That's a pretty serious claim. So I need clarification." Karen stood now. "He was joking. Boys joke around. You can't be seriously. I'm not here to argue," I said, voice firm but low. "I'm here to make sure no one else gets hurt because of a joke that's hiding something real." She took a breath like she was winding up for something legal sounding, but I held up a hand. "This isn't a threat. It's a warning. I don't need to ruin lives. But if I find out there's a pattern, and today certainly fits a pattern, you can't expect it to stay sealed forever." Karen's face twitched. Not rage. Not panic. Just realization. The kind that slips through when someone who's always been shielded suddenly sees the armor's cracked. Chad tried to brush it off. "Look, man, I was just messing around. There's no DUI. My dad's sheriff. He'd never let something like that happen." "I know," I said. "That's why I believe you." And just like that, the words landed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The recognition. The moment Chad realized I wasn't just some guy with tongs and good barbecue sauce. That I wasn't one of the people he could talk down to, walk over, or write off. I turned without waiting for more protest. The conversation wasn't about scaring them, it was about planting something deeper. Doubt. Reflection. The knowledge that someone had finally drawn a line, not in shouting or threats, but in consequence. When I got back to the grill, Mrs. Delgado handed me a soda and nodded toward the trees. "They quiet now?" I smiled, cracked the can open. "They'll stay quiet." She sat beside me, watching the sky dim. "You didn't raise your voice." "No need. You get through. Time will tell." We sat in silence a while longer, the coals dying down, the park slowly emptying. Families said their goodbyes, folding chairs disappeared into trunks, and trash bags filled with the remains of summer joy and stubborn pride. By the time I packed up the grill, the Whitmores were gone. No tantrum. No final word. Just chairs left in crooked rows and one cooler abandoned, still half full. It wasn't over. But it had shifted. The balance. The dynamic. The illusion of untouchable privilege that had cracked, just a little, under the weight of one quiet warning. Sometimes justice doesn't wear sirens. Sometimes it smells like hickory smoke and comes wrapped in foil, and I wasn't done yet. Monday morning came with the same lazy southern humidity that seemed to cling to everything in this town, like an old memory that didn't know when to let go. I was in line at the local cafe, waiting on my usual, black coffee, no sugar, and a side of peace. A few folks nodded as they passed, friendly in the way small towns are when they think they know you. I nodded back, polite, unreadable. The barista, Rachel, leaned over the counter when she saw me. "Hey Jay," she said, voice low but a little too interested. "You hear about what happened at the sheriff's office?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, but I get the feeling you're about to tell me." She grinned like a kid with a secret. "Sheriff Whitmore's on administrative leave for the week. Whole department's buzzing. Something about a discrepancy in sealed juvenile records and misuse of authority?" I blinked once, slow. "Huh. Yeah," she said, drawing it out. "Crazy how stuff like that just comes out." "Crazy," I repeated, then took my coffee with a nod. "Appreciate the update." "Anytime," she said. "Oh, and Karen Whitmore was in earlier. You'd think someone just told her church got cancelled. She left without ordering. First time ever." I didn't smile until I was outside. That IT hadn't taken much. Just the right form, the right request, and the right nudge to the internal affairs unit, quiet, professional. No headlines, no spectacle. Just a slow unveiling of truths long kept under wraps. A few sealed files were flagged for review, and one anonymous notation of concern had prompted the kind of scrutiny that even a sheriff couldn't wave away. That's the thing about justice, it isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's patient. Sometimes it shows up not with sirens, but with cold policy and carefully placed questions, and sometimes, it arrives wearing an apron. That I drove by the park later that afternoon, partly out of habit, partly out of curiosity. The space was almost empty, save for a few teenagers tossing a football and an old man walking his dog. The air still held the faint smell of charcoal and grass, and the benches wore the sticky residue of soda spills and potato salad stains. Life had moved on, as it always does, but something had changed, not visibly. Not loudly. But the shift was there, like the difference between hot coals and warm ash. The Whitmores weren't at the next city council meeting. Karen, normally front and center with her clipboard and passive-aggressive comments about street parking, didn't even RSVP. Chad's name disappeared from the summer internship list at the Chamber of Commerce, and word around town was that he'd decided to take a break and refocus. That's polite speak for, his last name isn't enough anymore. The justice wasn't jail time or lawsuits. It wasn't scandal or exile. It was inconvenience. Embarrassment. Doors that used to open without a knock now staying closed, just a little. It was the gentle, public reminder that actions, even whispered ones, have echoes. I got a thank you card in the mail a week later. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably Mrs. Delgado's, elegant, precise, like a woman raised on manners and meaning every word. Inside was a short message. For the quiet way you stood tall, for the ribs you didn't serve, for the lesson they won't forget. I kept it, not out of pride, but because some victories are worth remembering, even when they don't come with applause. The next cookout came around in late July. Different vibe this time, smaller crowd, more familiar faces, and a whole lot more respect floating in the air like smoke from the grill. Folks brought dishes without being asked. Helped set up without being told. And when I lit the coals, nobody assumed anything except that the food would be good and the company better. As I turned the ribs with practiced ease, a young girl from down the street wandered over. Maybe 12. Curly hair, braces, fearless curiosity. "Mr. J," she asked, eyeing the sizzling meat, "do you ever mess up?" I laughed, low and warm. "All the time," I said. "Just gotta know when to fix it, and when to let it burn." She grinned and skipped away. Later that evening, I poured myself a tall glass of sweet tea and settled into one of the folding chairs, the kind that sinks just enough to make you feel anchored. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting the park in that honey gold light that makes everything look like a memory even as it's happening. A soft breeze stirred the napkins. Somewhere a kid was laughing, off-key and genuine. And I sat back, watching the smoke curl upward, not as a warning this time, but as a celebration, because justice had been served, quietly. Slowly, just like the best barbecue.